Hello, welcome to Upload with me. My name is Karl, and this is a channel where I take you around bits of London and show you their history. So today we're going to do part 2 of the Soho tour, and we're going to pick up where we left off. Hold on. So we're going to pick up where we left off here at the Jon Snow pub, and we'll continue on from there. I'm just going to take you back. The year is 1825. A local lawyer has been invited to a dinner party, and at that party is an old man who is obviously very impoverished. And through the course of the evening, the lawyer gets more and more fascinated with the statements of the old man. And by the end of the evening, he's gone home and he's written down as much as he could of what he could remember of what the old guy said. And one of the things he wrote was, is this guy an artist? Is he a mystic? Is he a genius? Or is he a madman? And by a couple of years later, when the old man died and he had spent a lot of time transcribing a lot of his conversations, he came to the decision he was pretty much all of the above. And that person was born here. And this is the spot where William Blake was born. Now, says here, William Blake was born on 20th of November 1757 in a house which stood on this site. Unfortunately, his memorial looks like this, which is, you know, a bit hideous. So it was here, as it says, he was born here, and it was here that Blake basically, at the age of 4, believed he saw the face of God in the window. So Blake, as it says, was born here, lived here for quite some time. His parents had I believe it was a hosiery shop, and he then lived nearby for a large period of his life as well. But Blake was, was alone in his own time. He wasn't exactly given the respect that he's got now. He was an artist, he was a poet, and medical sort of historians now believe he's suffered from a condition known as hyperphantasia. Now, if you've never heard of that one, don't be surprised. Very few people have it. So if I was to ask you to imagine an apple in your mind's eye, if you close your eyes and you can see an apple, you're like sort of 80-90% of the population. If you can't see it, then I believe it's about 10% of the population. That's aphantasia. Hyperphantasia, for William Blake, the apple was as real as these buildings, the trees, those cars, you name it. It was just completely real to him, to the extent that he could see whole cities in the sky. And this led to his very sort of strong religious beliefs. He didn't have much time for organized religion, but did have a very strong belief in God, and he had his own sort of way of practicing his faith. But he believed there was a sort of better life waiting for us all. But not only that he could see it. So one of his writings was, if the doors of perception were cleansed, then man would see the world as it is, infinite. And from that statement, we got the oldest Huxley book, The Doors of Perception. And from my side, much more importantly, we got the name for one of the best rock bands of all time, The Doors, because Jim Morrison was a big fan of Blake's work. I have to say I've read some, or I've seen some of his art. I'm not crazy about it. He did write Tiger, Tiger, Burning Bright. He also wrote the words that were set to music that became Britain's sort of alternative national anthem, Jerusalem, and much other stuff. But he's proved to be very influential after his death, although he lived much of his life in poverty, but obviously was able to move about in high society quite happily. So that's our first stop, the birthplace of William Blake. And now we're going to take a nip down this street. Now, the only reason I'm taking this route is because it's a nice little street, Canton Street. You got the cobbled bits to give it sort of a bit of an old-fashioned look. So, you know, it takes you back to the Georgian days. Well, I suppose then it probably would have been more knock on the street than anything else. But the place we are going to, don't know if you can see there's a big arch over there. We are entering Carnaby Street. Now, Carnaby Street in the early 60s, it had a big article in some of the fashion magazines and, you know, popular magazines. You got to remember, this is the time of the Beatles, the Stones, everything was very hip and very trendy. And Carnaby Street was seen as being on the cutting edge of the fashion scene. And it was all part of that sort of swinging London scene. And the man behind it all, or at least behind the boutique that took off, was a guy called John Stephen. And he's got a couple of plaques on Carnaby Street, because I think he ended up on about 15 shops. And here is one of them. And it says, Lord John, during the swinging 60s fashion revolution, this building housed the gold-brother'd iconic store, famous for its trend-setting mud clothes and psychedelic murals. Well, now it's got a beauty place. And you can see there's Carnaby Street in all its glory early on a Sunday morning. Now, in terms of fashion, Carnaby Street was already sort of out of fashion by, you know, the mid to, or probably by the late 60s, and it was sort of trading on its sort of faded glory. And even today, tourists still come. It's still a name that attracts people, and there isn't much in the way of cutting edge fashion. It's lots of mostly chain stores, maybe the odd independent. But you know, it's a nice street to do it up nicely throughout the year with, you know, various decorations. And as I say, it's still a bit of a tourist trap. So we are going to come to our next stop. And that is this mural, which is known as the Soul of Soho. Now, let's see, if I just tilt up. There you go, you can see all of it there. Okay, so this is a mural which basically gives a depiction of some of the people and events of and places of Soho throughout the years. So I can tell you some of it. So if you look round about here, just below the guy in the yellow jacket, you can see a hound with a hare on it, and it's blowing a trumpet, and that's going back to the origins of the name of Soho, because Soho was said to come from a hunting cry. So obviously a bit ironic that the hare's on the dog and not the other way around, but there you go. The people at the bottom, for example, the person in the yellow jacket, that's Mozart, because he lived in the area for a bit. The guy above it in the big white beard and the DK in front, that's Karl Marx, because he wrote Das Kapital while he was working here, living here. Lived here for over, lived in London for over 30 years, but a fair amount of that time was in Soho. The lady to his right was the famous hostess Teresa Cornelius, who we'll come to later. She had a big house called Carlisle House, which was basically a big pit of debauchery. And the guy in the red coat to her right is Casanova. Now, if they look a bit odd, it's because apparently when it's working on the hour, Karl Marx will drink a can of Coke Teresa will wink at you, hence the left eye being a bit different, and Casanova then blows her a kiss. At one time they were lovers. But then you've got lots of other people all painted in. I imagine some of them are locals, some of them are historical figures. I certainly don't know all of them. If we go further up, you can see Chinatown, you know, sort of above the people, and the sort of middle right there. You got Chinatown, Shaftesbury Avenue. You've got the theatrical masks, and you've got the Apollo Theatre, amongst others, all reflecting the fact that Soho and the theatre district all go hand in hand. You've got people doing the can-can to the left there, and imagine it's just, you know, the various nightclubs. To the left, you see the guy in the golds and the green square. That's Golden Square that we'll be coming to, and so that is George II, and lots of other stuff. Like you got Groucho Marx up above the Apollo Theatre, because there's a place called the Groucho Club. You've got a windmill because you got Windmill Street, which we'll come to. So lots of stuff reflecting the history of Soho. And up the middle towards the top is like a film strip, because there's lots of movie studios, and it's a sort of hub for artists, writers, movies, music publishing, everything. And the whole thing is taking place on the sort of open skirt of the lady at the top, and she is St Anne, because at the entrance to Soho down by the Shaftesbury Avenue end there is a church called St Anne's. So that is St Anne's, and sort of spreading out that sort of tapestry of Soho. And on the top right there you've got the Palladium, because it's in Soho. The middle right, I'm not sure, it looks like some sort of circus going on. Oh, it's Carnaby Street, I think, because you've got the arch. And then the bottom right, you've got some local people who spent their time drinking here when they weren't being creative. So the guy on the bottom left, I think, is Dylan Thomas, I believe. I'm going to guess that the lady at the back is a lady called, what was it, Catherine Belchier, I think it was. She ran one of the clubs that all the guys used to go and drink in. The bottom right with the saxophone is Ronnie Scott. George Melly in the stripy jacket at the back there. And then the guy in the middle, I believe, now I could have got him mixed up with the guy in the white shirt, but one of them anyway, Brendan Behan. I think it's the guy facing us. So Brendan Behan was a famous Irish novelist and playwright. Some funny stories about Brendan. One I like was his last words. So basically, he spent much of his life in an alcoholic stupor. And when he was lying in his sort of deathbed being tended to by nurses who were nuns, he came around long enough to recognise what was happening, and he just said to them, "Bless you ladies, and may all your sons be bishops," which is fairly typical of Brendan. So, like I say, can't explain all of it. I suppose if I went off and researched it could, but we'd be here forever. But that is the Soho mural. Okay, and not Muriel, as I've heard some people call it. Okay, so let's take a walk back down the street. And if I remember right, there is another plaque to John Stephen just at the bottom here. Oh, some pictures of the Stones. It's the Rolling Stone shop, that'll be why. Yeah. See? 60 years later and they're still turning up here. And yeah, here's another plaque to John Stephen. Just tilt this up slightly. So John Stephen, 1934 to 2004, founder of Carnaby Street as World Centre for Men's Fashion in the 1960s. There we go. Oh, that's quite funky. You got the big Soho arch there. I hope you can see that across the street. It's quite nice. Now, as we mentioned before, Soho was a place where lots of immigrants of various nationalities came to stay. Around here was the Italians, and one of them was the guy who lived in this house. So I'll just tilt up. Oh, sorry, my mistake. So there we go. So there's a blue plaque there. I think it's a bit too small for you to read, but it says Antonio Canal, called Canaletto, from 1697 to 1768. Venetian painter lived here, and he lived here for about 9 years. So basically, he came to London because normally people would have come to him. I hope you can hear me with all this wind. But basically, people would have come to him for artworks over in Europe. But there was a big sort of ongoing war in Europe for a fair while to do with Austria. And it stopped a lot of people travelling. A lot of people probably would have bought his paintings. And so he basically took the view, well, if they couldn't come to him, he'd come to them. So he came here, as I say, lived for about 9 years, from 1746 to 55, and he did about 55 paintings in that time. And I have to, well, one of the ones that I've seen a few of them, and I have to say the one I really like is the one of Greenwich. It's got Greenwich, the Royal Naval College and everything. And it does harken back to some of the stuff he did of the Venice Canal and all that, but it's a beautiful painting. Now on the mural, I pointed out Golden Square and I said we'd be going there, so here we are. And if any of you want to pause the video and have a read of the history of it, here you go. So basically it's said that it's supposed to come from geldings, which were once kept here, and then gelding over time became golden, and that was supposed to be the origins. But however, I have also read an alternative theory that there was a pub nearby with the word golden in it that everybody knew, and basically people would sort of say, I'll meet you by the square by the golden whatever it was pub, and that was an alternative origin. But like some of the stories of London, you just can't be certain, because sometimes the colloquial overtakes the official. But this was an area where there would have been embassies. I think there was a Swiss embassy, I think a Portuguese. But I know Charles Dickens was no fan of it. Basically said it's sort of middle of nowhere and not particularly leading to anywhere. Now this man here, this was George II. And as you can see, he obviously had quite an opinion of himself. He is the last... This is the last reigning monarch to have a statue made of themselves in military dress. And what military dress it is, because this wasn't the English army military dress of the time. This is like Roman attire, the toga and the stuff around the waist and all the rest of it. So he obviously, fancied himself a bit. And maybe because of this bit of hubris, maybe that was why they stopped doing it in military dress after him. So in the summer, and the weather's a bit nicer, it's not a bad little square, I suppose, to come and sit and eat your sandwich. And yeah, like I say, some people haven't been very complimentary towards it. Now we're going to go on to our next stop, and I have a bit of explaining to do, because I filmed this. Some of you may know that I recently had a sort of a gap in my uploads because I'd had some technical issues, and there was 1 week when I couldn't get anything uploaded, so I just did a little explainer. Alright, just noticed my microphone had turned itself off, so hopefully we've picked up what I've been saying off the camera mic, and then we shall carry on with the regular mic. Now, I just seem to have lots of technical difficulties at the minute. That is to visit this house. It says John William Polidori, poet and novelist, author of The Vampire, born and died here, 1821. So basically, the year was 1816. 4 people were staying at a chalet in Switzerland. I think it was off Lake Geneva. One of them was Percy Bysshe Shelley, the poet, his wife Mary, Lloyd Byron, who was like the dodgy rock star of his day, a famous poet. Women would swoon, but he was held for treating people very badly, and his doctor, John Polidori. So they are having it was a bit of a stormy night, and they decide to start telling ghost stories, and then they set each other the challenge to each write a sort of horror story. Start writing one. The most famous thing that came out of that was obviously Frankenstein by Mary Shelley, and I believe Byron and Shelley each wrote something. But what Polidori did was he took a story that had been previously written by Byron called The Fragment, and he basically took elements of it and then elaborated on it and embellished it, and sort of created a whole new story about this vampire. So what happened afterwards was they come back, he tries to get it published, it doesn't happen. Then somebody else publishes it under the name of Byron, and I've read 2 different accounts of this. So one is Polidori basically tries to get Byron to agree that it was actually his story. In reality, Byron accuses him of plagiarism, and he goes and drinks prussic acid and kills himself. I suppose the dishonour and all the rest of it. Other version is Byron actually did admit that it was his story and tried to get the recognition that he deserved, but the fact is he was drowning in debts. I don't know what, gambling, I don't know. But he was drowning in debts, he suffered from depression, and either he killed himself or he just died. Apparently the coroner at the time said natural causes, his family said no, he had taken prussic acid. So either way, a bit of a tragic end for a bloke who was, let's see, he would only been about 26. But I suppose his legacy in terms of the vampire story, given that this was, somewhat at least 50, 60 years before Dracula was written, his legacy was he brought two new things to the vampire legend that hadn't really been there before. One was the deathly white pallor of the vampire, and the other one was his tendency to prey on high society women in English society, or London society. So, English, because just sort of thinking, I know he had places dotted around here in London, but Whitby plays a part in the vampire thing, if memory serves, and Dracula. And so that's the two versions of Polidori and his legacy to literature, which isn't bad. If you contributed a bit to one of the most popular horror stories of all time, I think you haven't done too bad. Right, we're going to go back around Brewer Street. Now, I'm just going to point out, we may see some shop fronts that some of you might sort of raise an eyebrow at. One of the things about Soho is the sex trade sort of moved from Southwark in the 1600s up to Covent Garden in the 1700s, and then it moved up this area, and in the 1970s especially, in the 50s it was probably more, it was right, but by the 70s it was very well publicised. Soho was basically seen as the centre of London's sex trade. It was very much left to its own devices. There were supposed to be about 200 establishments in the area, selling services of one sort or another, and it was all in collusion with gangsters who owned the local clubs and bent police officers who basically left them to it. And for that reason, it ended up being the home of A, the sex trade, and B, the homosexual community, because it was one of the few places they could go to at a time when homosexuality was illegal. This is one of the few places that they could come, socialise, do everything else without fear of sort of persecution or getting nicked. And so in the 70s there was moves to license the sex trade, which got rid of a lot of the establishments. But there is, if you were coming here to visit and have a wander around, if you've got any children, be prepared. There are some shop windows that will definitely make you go, I'm sorry, but what's that? But despite that, life goes on in the area. There are people that live here, and here's the example. Primary school looks a bit like a prison, doesn't it? But basically this is the Soho Parish Church of England Primary School, says that. And that is for the local kids, and I'm sure the local kids have seen some sights and just got used to them. So we're going to come down here. Now, that big theatre on the left that says Windmill. Surprise, surprise, at one point there was a windmill very near here. I think it was just down to the right. The theatre has been famous on and off for many years. One of the reasons it was famous, I think we were talking 1930s, 40s, thereabouts, don't quote me, but there is a movie. There was a movie with Judi Dench called Mrs. Henderson Presents, and it was based on a true story about the Windmill Theatre, and it was basically probably one of the ways in which the sex trade in the area sort of showed itself. So they used to do shows in here with naked women, but the law at the time said if you're going to show nudity, you couldn't have the people moving. So what they would do is they would do tableaus of like famous artistic scenes and that sort of thing. Draw back the curtain and there'd be all these naked women sitting there, and all the blokes and their wives, mistresses, whatever, sitting having drinks and admiring the show. So that's where, if you ever see the movie Mrs. Henderson Presents, this is where that took place. Now, we are more interested, to be honest. Here we go, spin round, right. We are more interested in this establishment. Just scroll, tilt up a bit. So, at one point, this was known as the Red Lion. And the Red Lion is famous because in here, in 1847, I believe it was, Karl Marx and Friedrich Engels, there was the second sort of grand meeting, a sort of league meeting of people who believed in communism as a way forward, for government and life. And the second grand meeting took place upstairs in the Red Lion. And apparently, after 10 days of debate, Karl Marx and Friedrich Engels argued the toss to get the right and the funding to go away and write the Communist Manifesto, which they then did. He used to give lectures up here apparently, and apparently there was like, it was like a club where, fellow communists thinking people could come, and obviously a lot of spies as well. So we'll come across Karl Marx again later, but this is where our first encounter with him is. And it's weird to think something that covers so much of the planet as a form of government sort of really got its kickstart here, and there's nothing to tell you about it, which I find a bit odd. This is Archer Street. No, hold on. I dropped my microphone thing. Hold on. Bear with me. You can see what I mean about sort of movie industry and all that. Archer Street Studios, I don't know what they do. We've got the stage door of the Apollo Theatre here. And when it comes to where do people live, we've got Archer's Chambers. If you scroll up, you'll see no doubt lots of little flats. Well, possibly quite sizable flat in there. There we go, Oliver's playing in that theatre. Possibly the most famous sort of place for the sex trade and what type of fight. The famous Raymond Review Bar, which was owned by Paul Raymond. I'm sure he died a few years back. But that sits up there. And as you can see, you've got the flags out representing the fact that we are in basically what I would call the gay headquarters of the UK. And if you're ever down here, on Pride Day, oh my god, the energy of the place is phenomenal. My daughter and I were up here a couple of years ago for Pride. Didn't actually come up for it, we just happened to be walking through. But it was so good, and the energy was so fantastic, we just hung about. Now, when I showed you the mural, I said you had St Anne's Church, and this is it. Now, don't be fooled, there's not much of a church there. You've got the tower, and that's pretty much all that's left, because it was all destroyed during the Blitz. Soho escaped the Blitz for the most part, and this is one of the bits that didn't survive. I'm sure it was a Blitz that this got damaged in. And the famous writer, Dorothy Sayers, who did the Lord Peter Wimsey books, she was a church warden here. And she actually had her ashes interred inside whenever she died, even though she lives out in Essex, out my way. This is where her ashes were placed. And as well as writing the Lord Peter Wimsey detective series, she was also a leading scholar on Dante Alighieri, the Italian writer. She was one of the main people when it came to his works. Alright, so we're at the bottom of Wardour Street, and you know what, sometime we'll have to do a walk down Wardour Street, because it's just so famous with the movie industry, history and everything, the music. But today, I'm just going to take a nip around into Old Compton Street. Now, you would probably say this is the centre of the gay scene in Soho, and yet, ironically, Compton Street is named after a bishop. Now, across the street here, above the chipping, we have a green plaque, and it says, "Site of the Two Eyes Coffee Bar, birthplace of British rock and roll and the popular music industry." So basically, this was a cafe sort of music place, late 50s, 60s. Am I still recording? How's the battery went? Hold on, let me just check. Oh, I'm still going. Okay, bear with me. Right. So this was the site of a cafe. I think it was run by two Iranian brothers, hence the Two Eyes. And basically, the early days of British rock and roll, Cliff Richard, Tommy Steele, Marty Wilde, all these names that went on to become the main figures of British rock and roll of the type, until the Beatles arrived and just blew everything else away. This is where it all kicked off. And you would get, sort of movie figures that would come here in the same way that they did around the rest of Soho. But people like Michael Caine, Terrence Stamp, that would sort of come here to see the acts, that sort of thing. But this is where, for many people, the British rock scene took off. Like I say, really until the Beatles came along and everything changed. But that's the Two Eyes. So let's head on down Compton Street. If you're wondering what the red thing is up at the end, that is it the Palace Theatre? I can't remember, but it's where the Michael Jackson show is currently shown. Prince Edward. Here's the Prince Edward. Okay. Right, we're going to take a walk along up Dean Street. I suppose really what I sort of mentioned the French house first. A lot of roadworks going on here at the minute. So let's get the French house done. So the French house, as it says, French pub, and basically it still serves in sort of half pints, sort of like whatever it is in Europe, half litres, whatever. But instead of pints like everywhere else in England, this still serves in sort of European measures. So during the war, this was where the the Free French used to hang out. Charles de Gaulle used to come here, have meetings, plan stuff in terms of, repatriating France from the Germans. And this is where a lot of that went on, and it's been that way for about 100 years now. It originally started with the French guy who took it over, and then his son took it over after him whenever he died, and the tradition continues, and it's a very, very popular pub. Again, you could sort of mention all the different literary figures and whatnot used to drink it, but it seems like they just drank everywhere. Like, for example, Dylan Thomas, the famous Welsh writer, he lost his only handwritten copy of Under Milk Wood in that pub, and then went off on a pub called Bender. Woke up the next morning and realised he had lost it, and then said to the bar owner that if he could track it down for him, he would give him the original transcript, the manuscript, which he did. And then when he went to sell it some years later, Dylan Thomas's wife tried to sue him for the money and failed. So as I say, we're in Dean Street. Now, that white building with the green awning is the Groucho Club, which has long been a place for the media industry to go and celebrate, be it movies, music, books. Like, if you won the Booker Prize, you'd maybe come here. It's called the Groucho Club because apparently it's named after the famous Groucho Marx saying that he wouldn't belong to a club that would have him as a member. Number 41 here is no longer what it used to be, but that doorway used to lead to a private club called the Colony Club, and that was run by a very foul-mouthed lady called Muriel Belcher. Obviously the surname isn't exactly polite either, but her name Muriel Belcher, and apparently in his youth, before he even really sold any paintings, the artist Francis Bacon, he was one of the very first members. But because he knew other people who were like artists and musicians and all the rest of it, she would basically give him a very sort of modest amount of money to basically drink there and encourage other people to come. And then it became a very exclusive, like, I would imagine unless you were in them, you basically didn't get in, or unless you were well in with somebody. So, the likes of Lucy Freud, Peter O'Toole, Tom Baker, the literary figures that just goes on and on, all used to drink in there. Like I say, amongst other places. Okay, now I've got a feeling my battery's going to go soon. So, just check the time. Yep. I expect it to die any minute. So, I'm going to stop here and change my battery, and then we shall continue on. So, bear with me. Okay, we're back. So, I had just stepped in off Dean Street into a place called Meard Street. I think it's Meard, M-E-A-R-D. I'm hoping it's not pronounced Meard because that would be unfortunate with the French connotations. But I just thought I'd show you because this was 1732, a very fine bit of Georgian architecture, very sort of fancy. And there's one slight, I find it funny story just down here as well. So let me spin it around. I think it's been used as an external location for a few series like Sherlock Holmes and that sort of thing. As you can see in this part of it, there's literally only about half a dozen houses. But this one, number 7, the first time I came up here, I have to say, I did laugh out loud. I don't know if you can tell, but just above the door knocker, I can see with my eye, I'm not sure if it shows up in the camera, you can tell that there was something there. There was a sign. And it was basically a big brass plaque looked very official, like something you see in a government department. Big brass plaque, and what it said was, "This is not a brothel, there are no prostitutes living here." I can only imagine that they must have been plagued with people who have been given this address sometime in the past and thought it was still a brothel, a knocking shop, as we say, and were getting pestered by people. So they felt the need to put the plaque up, but it's since been removed. So maybe it was making too many Instagram pictures and that sort of thing. But as I say, it's a lovely little street. Come on, spin right, there we go. It's a lovely little street. Very short, it just leads through to Wardour Street. But still retains its sort of 18th century look. And there is a sign up here on the left which says it was built in 1732. Oh, now I'll just mention there's something that I do. Can you see the little green figure on red background? I'll just explain about that. Nothing to do with history. This is street art. So basically, there is a Parisian artist who puts these little figures dotted around the place. Way more of them in Paris than there is here, but there's a number of them dotted around London. And you can download an app, and when you see one, you take a picture of it, and you can collect them. So if you're ever coming here with kids, it might be a good thing for them. It's called Invaders, and it would be something for them to look out for, because I believe there's several of them in Soho, and you can find lists of where they are on websites. So, like I say, coming here with kids, something to entertain them while you're having a look at the history of the area. Alright, so, and there is a blogger called Jay Swanson that I have to thank for knowing about that. I follow him in Paris, and it's him watching his vlog that put me onto it. Now, there is a sign here, which I will do a close-up of, give you a bit of a history of the street, in case any of you want to pause and read it. Hold on, how's this? It's not quite aligned. Oh, I think my camera needs tightening up, but I don't have the screw with me. So here, we'll see how we go. So yeah. So for any of you that want to know the history of the street, that tells you all about it. It also mentioned near the end that this used to be a club called the Gargoyle Club, and people like Tully the Bankhead and Fred Astaire and Dylan Thomas. Augustus John, we'll mention him in the Fitzrovia walk, used to come here. Now what it doesn't mention is that in the 1980s, this club that was in here was the birthplace of the Goth scene, because there was a club in here called the Bat Cave that became known as, and all the people used to go to it. This is where the whole Goth thing took off, and you would get artists like Robert Smith the Cure would sort of appear here, Steve Strange from Visage, numerous others. This is where it all sort of started off from, and because of the dress sense and everything else, it became known as the Bat Cave, and if you went there you were a Bat Caver, and then it led on to the whole Goth thing. And now it's called the Townhouse, and I think it's just like a bit more of a respectable place to come and spend your time. Okay, now how are we doing? Right, we're going to continue on in Dane Street. And of course the next place we want to look at has got a lot of scaffolding up. Oh, well, maybe it's the one next to it. Okay. Right, so this is Quo Vadis, which has been here for many years. I would imagine over 100 years it's been an Italian restaurant, very famous. And it's also famous for, I don't know if you can see the blue plaque, it says Karl Marx 1818 to 1883, lived here between 1851 and 56. Now he also lived further up the street, but where he lived before has been demolished. But he lived here, and apparently in absolute poverty. Everything was broken, covered in dust. This was at a time when Soho, in the 1800s, it was a bit like Spitalfields that had become overpopulated, and a lot of refugees coming into the area because it was so cheap, overpopulating the area, and rooms were very cheap. And of course, eventually that would lead on to the restaurants and the artists and the writers and all moving into the area because it was a place to get cheap digs. But in the 1800s, it was ridiculously bad in terms of poverty. Like Marx lived here. He had his wife, his children, and a maid. And I imagine the maid basically lived for, she did the work basically just for somewhere to stay and their food. And obviously, in keeping with the area's reputation for the sex trade, Marx did manage to get her pregnant. Also, like three of his children died here, but they were so poverty-stricken, they couldn't even get a coffin, couldn't afford a coffin for one of them. It was that sort of setup. But let me see if I can spin this round. I'm getting worried because my camera's gone a bit loose on the device, and I don't have an Allen key to tighten it. But here we go. So, far be it from me to call Karl Marx a raging hypocrite, but him and his family living here in absolute poverty. He's writing the Communist Manifesto. One of the main tenets, or one of the tenets of the Communist Manifesto is money belongs, everything belongs to the state, not to the private individual. And so, like if, whenever my parents died and they left me a little bit of money under the communist thing, that money would have went to the state. But Marx, his wife got left a bequest by a relative whenever he died, and as soon as they got that money, they were out of here like a rat up a drain pipe, moved to a more posh area and better accommodation. So does that make him a raging hypocrite? Far be it from me to say. But that is our little bit of Marx for this area. I will also mention one little thing over here. I'll need to do a close-up. And above this sign that says Quo Vadis is a nose. You see that nose? And that is stuck to the wall. And that is the work of an artist called Rick Buckley. Now, basically, 1997, CCTV cameras are being installed everywhere over London. And Rick Buckley was an artist, and he had the hump about this, basically. And he decided to install, as an art sort of statement of opposition, he installed all these noses around different parts of London, many of them in Soho apparently. Most of them have now gone, but there's still a few here in Soho. That's one of them. There's one on the Admiralty Arch, although they're doing some work on that, so that one might disappear. But they have led to, like the one on Admiralty Arch has led to an absolute myth. Given that it wasn't put there until 1997, somehow a myth has grown up that the one on Admiralty March was put there for the benefit of the soldiers who, when they were passing by on horseback, would rub the nose because it represented Wellington, the winner of the fight against Napoleon in the early 1800s. And it was like a good luck thing. I've had London cabbies tell me that as a bit of local history, and I've had to put them right. So, yeah. There's even a book called The Seven Noses of Soho, but I don't think there's 7 left anymore. But again, something you can get the kids to look out for if you're here with children. So hold on. There we go. Now, we're walking along Bateman Street, and we're going to go to Frith Street, and we're going to end tour number 2 of Soho here. show you this one place. So this is Hazlitt's, and as it says on the plaque, William Hazlitt, 1778 to 1830, essayist, died here. So Hazlitt, the jury's out. You say potato, I say potato. Anyway, you got to remember, 1700s, 1800s, writers, essayists, critics were very, very famous. You didn't have pop stars in those days. I suppose you had opera singers, but for among the public, writers were very, very famous, and he was well known. And he also did a four-volume book on Napoleon, and was a big believer in the French Revolution and all came out of it. So he kind of fell out of favour in the early 1800s. But anyway, he lived here. This is where he died. And apparently, when he died, his landlady was already, as he was on his last legs, his landlady was already, trying to get new tenants in. So much so that when he died, she basically, hid his body behind a piece of furniture while she was showing the next prospective tenants around the place, by all accounts. It has since gone on to become a very select place to come and stay as a hotel. There's 3 Georgian houses all joined together. Bill Bryson, whenever he was doing his book, was it Notes from a Small Island? When he came to London to do his segment on that, this is where he came to stay. But you get, sort of movie people and, all sorts. Frequently there's big Lamborghinis and everything parked outside. But today, it's looking a bit quieter. So, that's that. I'm just saying if there's anything else I can tell you about while I'm here. Nothing jumping out at me. Okay. So, that's it for tour number 2. I hope you enjoyed it. Hope it was good for you. If there's any questions or if you want to come on this walk with me, you can always go to the website, applaudwithme.com. But otherwise, if you just want to keep watching the videos and you want to subscribe, there should be a button appearing about now. Alright, so hope you enjoyed it, and I'll see you on the next one. Okay, bye.